What's the most gruesome thing you've seen happen in school? I saw a guy pick a fight with another guy, who I later found out was a state champion boxer. Dude threw several punches which Dude B easily dodged. When it became clear Dude A wasn't going to stop, Dude B threw one right hook. I saw teeth and blood fly, and Dude A hit the deck immediately, obviously unconscious. Dude B then backed away with his hands over his head to show he didn't intend to do anything more. One Punch Man. Middle school. Go to bathroom during class. Hear yelling inside. Go inside. To find one of the big bads of the school grab a dude the back of his head and repeatedly slam his face into the sink counter. Blood was flying everywhere. Ran to tell a teacher. Dude got suspended for 2 weeks. The one getting beaten never came back to school as far as I know. My high school had a pool, so every year we did a swimming unit for Penn. This meant changing into swim trunks at the start of the class, changing back at the end. So after class, we're all changing back into our street clothes. All of us except for Pat. Pat is holding his tighty white ties in his hand, staring at huge, chunky skid marks, and someone notices him doing it, and they get everyone else's attention. In seconds it's turned into a locker room full of teenagers pointing and laughing, and Pat didn't know what to do about it. He looked around at us, threw the underwear in the garbage, and declared, "Somebody pooped my pants." He spent the next 3 years being known as the guy who pooped his pants, and tried to blame someone else for it. But senior year, days before graduation, a friend of mine was reminiscing about his high school hijinks, and he told me, "Oh, yeah, one time when everyone was swimming, I went into the locker room and just took a dump in someone's underwear and put it back. He didn't even know whose underwear it was, didn't even care, just thought it was funny." 2 seniors took the blower type hand dryers in the men's room and turned the nozzle 180 degrees so it pointed straight up. They then placed a turd into the flow nozzle, baking it with hot air, and filling the whole first floor with the smell of a baking dicky. I later found out it took them 8 or 9 minutes of holding their breath and running back into the bathroom to run the blower again, since they only run about 20 seconds. During 4th grade my elementary school had a tall rusted fence that blocked the schoolyard from the outside, and some kid tried to climb it to get a ball back. He slipped on top and his arm got stuck by the top of the railing, perforating his arm and cutting it deep almost from wrist to elbow. He collapsed from shock and loss of blood still stuck to the railing. Fortunately the fire department got there in less than 15 minutes, and they got the kid out of it, saving him. He has this huge scar in his arm, but it's alive, well, and moves his arm well. To this day I can't shake that image out of my mind. I went to a Christian school. We had a middle-aged principal who was in his first year of employment at the school. One day at an assembly with all the students he was trying to explain to us how bad it was when Jesus got whipped. He asked a computer teacher to come join him up front to help out his demonstration. He began to take his belt off and handed it to the computer teacher. He then got down on his hands and knees and pulled his shirt up. He said, "Mr. XXXXXXX is going to whip me." The look on the computer teacher's face was like a deer in headlights. He was just as surprised as we were. The principal had to ask him multiple times to please swing the belt. He finally swung it, but very lightly. He was asked to swing the belt again, and so he did. Neither of the swings had anything behind it, because the poor guy had no intention of hurting anybody that day. We all were in shock at what we had just witnessed. That principal didn't last past that year. A friend in high school befriended a new kid from out of state. The new kid got her hooked on meth, and she was paying him for it with intimacy. Her brother 2 years older found out and went to confront them at lunch. He caught them having an intimate time at lunch in the car. I've never seen anyone get dragged out of a car and beaten so bad. The female security guard just screamed, "You're on school property, you're going to go to jail," and you dragged him into the street and kept beating him. Kinda wholesome. They sprayed for insects during the winter break, so when we came back to school, half-dead roaches started crawling out and fully covered the basement floor where still a lot of classes were held. Some guys played football with them. I had to do some presentation and couldn't stop staring at one twitching his legs on his back where the chalk was. I had to stop and ask someone to please remove it, but they were all over the place. It was bad. I was watching a fight in the halls of my high school years ago. It was right outside the counselor's office. The kids were going at it. No idea what the fight was about. The door to the counselor's office opens, and one of the kids in the fight, Jay, looked at the door to see if there was a teacher coming. As he did, the other kid who he was fighting with, Adam, took one big step back and full on haymaker Jay in the nose. After the fist connected, Jay's head reeled back and slammed into the concrete cinder block wall, and he collapsed. In 2nd grade, there was this kid who had 3 concussions. We'll call him Carl. One of which he got in front of me. He was running into the gym, tripped, and slammed his face into the windowsill. By the time I had ran over and joined the gawking crowd of little kids, he was just sitting there, sobbing. I looked down and saw his chin and hands bloody, and a little white tooth in his hand. Half of a tooth, more accurately. Anyways, I had a crush on Carl for the rest of the year, because for some reason I found idiocy attractive. When I was in middle school, I went to a school that took in kids from various economic backgrounds. There was this kid who had been part of a particular friend group for quite some time. I think since elementary, but in middle school they decided to give him the nickname Poor Kid. As you can imagine, he was not a fan. We will call him Eric, but I'm not sure what his name actually was. I was not really around for all of this as I was not in this group, but I was friends with some people in it, so I had been getting live updates. There was one kid who was the one that had created the nickname and made sure it was catching on. His name was maybe Scene. Scene and Eric had been very good friends until all this started happening. Basically, Scene would call Eric Poor Kid in all their interactions and Eric would ask him not to. I was there when this happened once or twice. I was sitting a table over from this group one day and I hear a scream. I look over and see Eric sitting across from Scene. Eric had a fork in his hand and had stabbed Scene's hand with it while it was sitting palm down on the table. Apparently Scene had called Eric Poor Kid one too many times and Eric had decided, since words weren't working, he would just stab him with his fork. It went almost all the way through his hand and a teacher walked him out of the cafeteria with the fork still in his hand. If you are out there, Eric, good job. From where I'm there is this type of sphere-shaped firecrackers that are quite dangerous. It could split your hand if you don't throw it before it explodes. It is illegal to be sold, but it's not super enforced. High school kids can easily buy this if they know where to look. In my high school, there were this group of kids got expelled for something they did, sniffing glue in school facilities. If I'm not mistaken, a couple of days after they were expelled, they all sneak into the school during morning assembly and start throwing bunch of these firecrackers toward everyone. It's not that gruesome and luckily nobody was injured, but it's freaking chaotic. You can see everybody's panicking, even the teachers. One of our main bullies, let's call him Dave, picked the wrong victim one day. Let's call him John. During recess, Dave gets riled up, looks for John, and decides to tackle him. Speeds up like mad, runs full force at John, plans to take him down by full body weight alone. He's done it before. He put someone in the hospital. He's full of confidence and the seething hatred of whatever a 12 years old can hate a random 10 years old for. John, maybe frozen in fear, maybe coldly calculating his master plan, doesn't move, doesn't blink, doesn't breathe, and then steps out of the way in the last possible moment. Dave, by now an unstoppable force, is faced with an immovable object, the schoolhouse wall. 1 Dave. 0. The crack of nose and skull is a noise all of the bystanders will remember forever. My high school had 3 balconies on the 2nd floor. Walking between classes you could see the mass of students moving below. There were massive skylights above, so I assume this was designed to allow natural light into the ground floor. One day someone thought it would be hilarious to toss an unopened can of soda over the balcony. People start yelling duck and a kid looked up just in time to have the can land right on his eye socket. He lost that eye. Second would probably be the kid who ended up at the bottom of the pile in football practice and came off the field screaming, and his thumb was in the middle of his palm.